2023 has been a pretty good year for video games so far, but that doesn't mean there haven't been some duds. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, the most disappointing games of 2023's first half. Starting out at number 10, it is Redfall. Now, Redfall is a big disappointment for me. I am a huge Arcane Games fan, and I wanted this to be good. It's an open world co-op first-person shooter from the creators of Dishonored, Prey, and Deathloop. All games I really like. And the description of Redfall sounds like something that could be good in the hands of Arcane particularly, but it's really just kind of an unfinished nothing game. Some of the visuals are pretty sweet. Not anywhere near all of the visuals though. There's some things involving the vampires and even some areas of the world that look pretty cool. But for the most part, it's a pretty middling combat, alright-ish open world affair. If you had an incredible story that connected all of it together, some of it's excusable, but it doesn't. There's just nothing going on. There is technically a narrative, but man, oh man, is it ever bare bones. There's just very little going on, and I don't think there's a better way to make a game that had some promise disappoint people. But I think probably the biggest disappointment about it is just that it's an Arcane game. Really, it should be better than this. I love Arcane, and they're capable of better than this. And number 9 is Forspoken. This one's not quite the same as Redfall, where developers that are normally incredible put out something that's middling in every possible way. And also, honestly, there's some gameplay in Forspoken that's pretty sweet. Some. But that's about it. Where Redfall comes off as unfinished, Forspoken comes off as half-baked. But ultimately, it is another one of those games where there are some pretty high expectations because a lot of the stuff sounds very cool. It just isn't. In our Before You Buy, Jake, I think, appropriately called it a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none situation. But I'd like to add that it's not really a jack of any of those trades, more like a crack at it, like taking a crack at all the trades. Well, look at all these trades. Oh boy, I could take a crack at them, and I will. I do think a lot of how people talk about this game is maybe unfair. I've definitely played worse games, but at the same time, it's also hard for me to blame anybody for having kind of a harsh opinion of it, because again, like, when they first showed this game off, they're showing us all this magical parkour stuff. High-speed traversal with parkour is really cool looking, and it just doesn't deliver. Like, it misses the mark hard.
Check it out, Fortress.
The combat is actually the cool part about it. Again, it's not perfect, and I mean, where it shines is where you're against the big old boss with spectacle going on and all that. And it's honestly a little less fun, and certainly a lot less spectacular when you're just kind of fighting normal enemies.
Okay.
That said, there's a lot going on there, and like I said, there's some good gameplay in this game. It's just not the majority of the game. There's a lot more stuff that just is much less fun. Much less fun. And like, again, everything about it is great in terms of its idea. The reveal was exciting. What the story sounds like it's going to be is frankly cool. And then it just, you know, it's not there really. It's not developed or just much of something at all, which is not how as a developer you hope people describe your game. And number 8 is Minecraft Legends. Before this release, it actually looked a pretty interesting game. It was kind of hard to tell exactly what it was supposed to be from the pre-release footage, but it seemed pretty ambitious at least. Minecraft Dungeons was alright. We could only assume Legends was going to be cool too. I mean, Minecraft is one of the biggest franchises in the world, and you wouldn't think they'd half-ass a game with the name on it, but this one's a mess actually. Basic concept, again, pretty good. Sort of like Pikmin crossed with more traditional RTS elements, set in an open world. On paper, that sounds really fun, but the execution just is subpar. The actual combat parts are so simplistic, they're practically brain dead. The game could be incredibly easy if not for some of the worst AI pathing in the world. I'll run through a single scenario. There's bad guys at the top of a cliff. That's where the base is. The only way to get in is to build a bridge. Fine, cool, makes sense. But the problems begin to come in when you're actually trying to get your units up the bridge. These things are narrow, and there's nothing stopping these idiots from just falling off the side. So most games make it so units just bunch up to get through narrow spaces, but not here. They just happily walk off the side of the bridge and get stuck. No, they don't try to backtrack and climb the bridge again. They just bunch up, and the only thing you can do is drop down and try to guide them back again and hope for the best. This sort of problem has been solved for many years, but for some reason Minecraft Legends, I don't know, just totally messed it up. Hey, look at this. What is this?
This outpost is done, but there are more piglins out there. There's no time to waste.
And number 7 is the last case of Benedict Fox. When they showed this game off the first time at Gamescom 2022, stood out as a game to keep your eye on. It's a Metroidvania with a pretty cool premise and some really gorgeous visuals. Honestly, the kind you don't see in games like this. It was an indie, but it got a pretty big push from Microsoft, and having a day one Game Pass release makes it one of the more noteworthy releases of the year. Unfortunately, it needed some more time in the oven. It was rough. The thing I noticed immediately when starting the game up was the controls, which were just really unresponsive and inconsistent. For any normal game, that's obviously a problem, but for a Metroidvania, it's much more of a problem. Like, these games are often about precision platforming and movement, so it kind of works itself out to be a death sentence. Sometimes jumps don't register, combat feels clunky, and it comes out awkward, even at the best of times. To make matters worse, though, the game had serious technical issues when it first came out. It had bugged saves, people lost progress, there were lots of graphical issues, stuttering, and for some reason a lot of people experienced a problem where the randomized puzzles would want an answer that was incorrect. Everyone was like solving the puzzles correctly, and the game was like, no, wrong, which I mean would kind of be hilarious if it wasn't just ruining the experience for people. On top of that, the actual Metroidvania elements were pretty just weak and basic, you know? Then there's the menus, which were clunky at best. The game just needed more QA time to get things right. And even though the developers are putting the effort in to improve what's there, even after a few bug fixes and patches, this game still feels like a disappointment. I know it's unfair to expect Hollow Knight here, but the last case of Benedict Fox just isn't good enough to be considered much more than a mediocre Metroidvania. And number 6 is The Last of Us Part 1 on PC, which, let me put it this way. When the guys were making the before you buy, the game didn't work. If you watch it, and I think that Jake handled this pretty even-headedly, he talks about how normally when a game comes out that we didn't get pre-release, we try to get a BYB out by the end of the day, but technical issues made that impossible. They were not minor, to put it mildly. And even when the game was going, it was not, there was something wrong. To quote Jake on the load times, he said, the load times were long. And not normal long, like something is wrong long. Because there was something wrong. And there was, not something wrong. Lots of things wrong. The game was a mess when it was released. Which is a shame because it's a beautiful, cool game. On PS5, it's the best version of The Last of Us Part 1 you could play. It is gorgeous. And when Last of Us Part 1 hit PC, it was the same game, but whole lot of problems.
It loaded for 5 minutes and then it hard crashed and it just rebooted. Oh God. The whole thing was bricked. It's finally back on, thank God, but I don't know if I want to do that again. Totally crashed again. So much for this one.
And number 5 is Wanted Dead. You see the trailer for this one, you can't help but be intrigued. It's got cyberpunk, John Wick looking takedowns, karaoke. It looked absolutely nuts. And while I didn't really set super high expectations, it looked fun. So obviously it did end up to be a disappointment. It's on this list. The thing about it is that it mostly works. The gameplay's a little janky, but blasting guys with a machine gun and then taking them out with a katana, it's fun. The real problem here is that there's just not much to it. After about an hour, you've seen pretty much about what the game has to offer, which it's longer than an hour. So let's do some math on that. I'm joking. I have no desire to do any math whatsoever. But outside of a few okay boss fights, there's really nothing else past that first hour. It promises an intriguing and goofy sci-fi storyline, and then, just kind of stops. It seriously got one of the most weird, abrupt endings I've ever seen for a game, too. And that's saying something. There are so many games where it's obvious the developers just ran out of time and money, so they just ended things early, but this game, They even have the balls to end on a cliffhanger, like this is gonna get a sequel. It's not. There is a lot of wacky, bizarre stuff that's actually kind of charming if you're into that sort of thing in games, but there's not enough of it. There's an entire arcade game they made just for this game, which is cool. But then you go on an actual mission and it's just tedious room clearing against the same enemies over and over again. Made worse by an extremely stingy checkpoint system, might I add. You can get sent back 20 minutes or more if you die at any time. Close range combat, pretty satisfying actually, but the guns are weak as hell. And certain enemies are just ridiculous bullet sponges that take forever to kill. There's a few things to like here, but there's also a whole mountain of awkward nonsense that never really comes together or makes sense. Just being quirky doesn't automatically make a game good, and nor does just having some good stuff in it. Wanted Dead is a perfect example of that. And number 4 is Colossal Cave. This one's only for the olds out there. If you're below 30, then the name Roberta Williams probably doesn't mean a whole lot to you. But for the people who do recognize this game, had a lot of big buzz. It's the writer, designer of classic adventure games like the King's Quest series, Phantasmagoria, and she returned to games after more than 20 years to recreate the original adventure game, Colossal Cave Adventure. For old school Sierra fans, that's a huge deal. Unfortunately, like a lot of new games made by retired old school game developers who came back to cash in on the Kickstarter craze, ooh, it's not good. Oh, it's not good. I mean, look at it. It just screams amateur hour from the very first moment. The entire thing looks like it was made with assets. Nothing seems to match. Everything looks flat and boring, and it's ugly. The adventure game elements are not much better. They're old school in the worst possible way. So many of the puzzles require just pure trial and error to solve. There's no logic to them at all. And with the awkward interface, it can sometimes be hard to tell what you can even do. But you can even get stuck on things that you know what to do with. That said, the interface is just constantly throwing up roadblocks. Even though it's an adventure game, for some reason there's random encounters where enemies attack out of nowhere and kill you. That sounds fun, right? The entire game is just that. Yeah, it's meant to be a throwback, but it probably would have been better if they just went with pixel art and also modernized some things about it. Not everything, but this is just a bad game at this point. Like, game development has advanced far beyond this, in ways well beyond graphics, and for good reason.
Little dwarf, watch out!
And number 3 is Crime Boss Rockay City. Trailers for this one were wild. It was like if you combined a C-tier Expendables movie with Mafia City, and unfortunately the actual game's not nearly that interesting. Nobody really knew exactly what it was going to be, so there was a little buzz from people thinking it was going to be some kind of FPS Grand Theft Auto or something, but the actual game is nowhere near that ambitious. It's actually just Payday, with a few more game modes and more confusing. The actual shooting and gameplay is actually alright, but the whole thing feels unnecessary. We already have Payday for one, and those games, they're just a lot better. So why? What's the point? It's very unmemorable in terms of gameplay, and the celebrity voice acting is not good.
Woo, looking fly, son. Baker's Blue X. All of it!
This looked fun.
Part of what makes this game not work is that there's just too many modes. It's all spread way too thin. There's a roguelike single-player mode, random crime jobs, where they're just payday missions, and all these mini campaigns called Urban Legends. It's too much. Should have just picked one gameplay style and really honed in on it instead of, I don't know, loading up the worst shotgun possible and trying to hit a target that's like at sniper range. The real crime that Rocky City has going on in it is that it's very boring. It's not even like an entertaining train wreck. It's just dull.
Yeah, just like the old days.
Yep, the good old days.
And number 2 is Grey Hill Incident. Might be a bit of a stretch to call this disappointing, but I don't know. This one could have been okay. We're always looking for good horror games, you know? And an indie developer can sometimes surprise you with something out of nowhere. But with a 37 on Metacritic and mostly negative reviews on Steam, it should be clear that this is not one of those hidden gems. It does manage to have a creepy atmosphere once in a while, but the second the aliens show up with their goofy heads and their silly black jumpsuits, that tension is gone. Jumps right out the window. Like, there's literally a guy with a tinfoil hat. He looks like a joke, but I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be serious. I don't know, the voice acting's so amateurish, it's actually hard to tell.
This can't be our end. I don't want to end up as an alien experiment victim. They already cleaned your house, so I don't think they're gonna come back. I've already started to board up your place. This will save us tonight.
And, you know, for a game made by a single person, it's pretty ambitious. I have to give it that, but that doesn't mean that it's good or that it doesn't have problems. It is very poorly optimized. Movement is very slow. There's no map, so you're getting lost constantly, and the objectives are never clear. You do get a gun, barely any ammo though, and that just makes stuff much more annoying. I could go on with all the gameplay mechanics that feel wrong. I mean, but what's the point? Like, look at these dumb aliens. They're some of the most unimpressive stalkers I've ever seen in a horror game. Like, in all seriousness, these guys look like Party City costumes. Do they not? And finally, at number 1, it's Lord of the Rings Gollum. I don't remember what video it was, but a while back, I remember seeing footage for this and saying that looks underwhelming. I was kind to it, though, in whatever video it was. I expressed a little bit of concern, but not a lot. I wanted it to be good, and when I booted it up, I wanted it to be good. To be truthful, the release version looks a lot better than the version that we saw years ago in terms of visuals, but that's not saying a lot, because it is not a remarkable game in terms of its visuals. But where it is a remarkable game is nowhere. It's not a remarkable game. It is a slow-paced slog where you do a lot of stuff that you feel like you shouldn't have to do in a game. Every once in a great while, there's this little tiny shimmer of, wow, that was why they wanted to make this, but it's just not enough. It's not even close to enough or halfway of enough. There's so little going on in this game, and the stuff that they do isn't done well. And again, I'll credit them for wanting to stick by it. They've said they're going to work on it, and I would like to see it be a good game at some point, but it's shocking how long they worked on this game and how little it actually is when it came out.